It was a cold winter night. The wind was sharp, and rain hit the streets like tiny needles. Most people were inside, sitting with warm food and hot drinks. But on that dark street, an old man and a little girl walked slowly, holding each other's hands. Their clothes were wet. Their shoes were torn. The old man's hands were shaking, but he kept walking for the girl. She looked tired and hungry. Her eyes kept looking around, searching for hope. Across the street was a fancy restaurant. It was bright and full of people, laughing and eating. The smell of grilled chicken and fresh bread came out through the windows. The little girl stopped. She pointed at the door. "Grandpa," she said softly, "can we go inside?" The old man looked at her, then at the restaurant. His eyes were full of pain, but he smiled. "Let's try, my child." Inside the restaurant, everything was perfect. The tables were clean. The waiters moved fast. Soft music played in the background. At the front desk stood the owner, Shabazz. He wore a dark blue suit and shiny shoes. He was proud of his restaurant. Every day, people with money came to eat here. Shabazz didn't like poor people near his door. He thought they made his place look bad. As the old man and the girl entered, all eyes turned to them. Their clothes were wet, mud covered their shoes. A woman in a red dress whispered to her friend, "What are they doing here?" A man in a corner looked away in disgust. Shabazz walked toward them quickly. His face was tight. He stood in front of them, blocking their path. "Excuse me," he said. "You cannot come here like this." The old man smiled kindly. "We are not here to cause trouble. The child is cold and hungry. Just a little food." Shabazz raised his hand. "No, this is not a place for beggars. Please leave." The girl looked down, embarrassed. The old man gently squeezed her hand. "Please, just for a moment. She hasn't eaten all day." Shabazz looked around. The customers were watching. He didn't want anyone to think he was soft. "Out," he said loudly. "Now?" The old man nodded slowly. "Come, dear," he whispered. They turned and walked out into the cold rain. The little girl didn't cry. She just held her grandpa's hand tighter. Inside, Shabazz turned back toward the kitchen, feeling proud. "I built this place with hard work," he told his staff. "Not for street people." But just then, his head chef Faisal ran out from the back. His face was pale. "Sir, do you know who that man was?" Shabazz frowned. "Just some old beggar." Faisal's hands were shaking. "That was Master Aftab." Shabazz blinked. "Who?" Master Aftab, Faisal repeated. "The man who gave you the loan to start this restaurant? The man who taught you how to cook?" Shabazz stood still. Faisal continued. "You told me the story yourself. When you were nothing, living on the streets, a kind man gave you food, shelter, and taught you everything. That was him. I saw the scar on his hand. It's the same." Shabazz felt cold inside. His throat dried. His heart started beating faster. Outside, the rain kept falling. The old man and the girl sat under a tree near the parking lot. He took off his coat and wrapped it around her. She looked up at him. "It's okay, Grandpa. I'm not that hungry." He smiled weakly and wiped her face. "You are strong, my little one." Inside, Shabazz ran to the door and looked outside. He saw them sitting far away. His chest tightened. "What have I done?" he whispered. Just then, a waiter came running toward him. "Sir, this came for you." He handed Shabazz a plain white envelope. Shabazz opened it. Inside was a small, folded paper. Only 3 words were written. "You forgot kindness." Shabazz's hands trembled. Faisal whispered beside him, "Sir, what will you do now?" Without answering, Shabazz rushed outside, his expensive shoes slipping on the wet pavement. He looked left and right, but they were gone. He ran down the street, calling Baba. "Sir, please stop." But the night swallowed his voice. The rain kept falling, and the guilt grew heavier. Shabazz stood in the rain, turning left and right, searching the street with wide eyes. But the old man and the girl had disappeared into the darkness. His heart beat fast. His shirt was soaked, his shoes were ruined, but none of it mattered now. All he could think about were those 3 words on the paper. "You forgot kindness." They echoed in his mind like thunder. Faisal, the head chef, came running with an umbrella. "Sir, let's go back. You'll get sick." Shabazz didn't answer. His mind was stuck in the past. He remembered being 19, hungry, alone on the street, rejected by everyone. A stranger had found him sitting near a garbage bin, offered him food, and gave him work in a small kitchen. That stranger was Master Aftab. Shabazz whispered to himself. How could I not recognize him? He walked back to the restaurant slowly, head down. Inside, the customers had returned to eating. The music played softly again, but Shabazz felt like everything had changed. He sat alone in his office and opened an old drawer. From the back, he pulled out a dusty file labeled Beginnings. Inside were old photos and a loan paper signed by Aftab's hand. It was real. Faisal was right. The man he had kicked out was the same person who had once saved his life. Shabazz stared at the photo of himself as a young man standing beside Aftab in front of a food stall. He looked so small then, so lost, but Aftab was smiling in the picture, proud and full of kindness. The next morning, Shabazz couldn't sleep. He went out early, before sunrise, walking the streets with a printed photo of Aftab in his hand. He asked tea vendors, newspaper boys, guards, anyone, "Have you seen this man?" Most people said no. One old man near the park said, "I think I saw him yesterday. He was sitting under a tree with a child. but then they left. Shabazz followed every lead but found nothing. After hours of walking, he sat down near a food cart and bought a cup of tea. As he waited, he noticed a small girl standing across the road, selling tissue boxes. Her eyes looked familiar. She was holding a broken umbrella and wearing the same pink jacket. He stood up quickly and walked toward her. "Excuse me," he said gently. She looked at him and froze. She remembered his face, the angry man who had shouted at them. She turned and ran. "Wait," Shabazz called, "please." But she disappeared into a narrow street. Shabazz chased her through the lanes. Finally, he saw her run into a small building that looked like a shelter. He followed but stopped at the entrance. A volunteer stood there. "Sir, you can't enter without permission. I'm not here to disturb anyone," Shabazz said. "I'm looking for someone, an old man and this little girl. They might be here." The volunteer looked at him carefully. "Wait here," he said. After a few minutes, the volunteer returned. "The girl is here, but the man is not. He left early in the morning, said he was going somewhere far." "Where?" Shabazz asked desperately. "No one knows. He didn't say, just left a letter." The man handed over a folded paper. Shabazz opened it with shaking hands. It read, "I saw his face change when he kicked us out. I don't hate him. I feel sorry for him. May he remember what kindness tastes like." Tears filled Shabazz's eyes. He looked at the volunteer. Can I talk to the girl? Just for a minute." The volunteer nodded slowly and led him to a small room. The girl sat on a thin mat, drawing with a pencil. When she saw Shabazz, she looked away. He sat down slowly. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know who your grandpa was." She didn't speak. "I was once like you, hungry, cold, alone, and a kind man helped me. Your grandpa, I forgot that. I forgot everything he taught me." She looked at him now, her eyes uncertain. Shabazz continued. "I kicked out the man who gave me food when I had nothing. The man who taught me how to hold a spoon, how to stir a pot, how to greet guests?" She asked quietly. "Then why did you hurt him?" "I was blind," Shabazz whispered, blinded by pride. She didn't answer, but she stood up and went to a shelf. She pulled out a small rolled paper and handed it to him. "He said to give you this if you ever came." Shabazz opened the paper slowly. It was an old recipe written by Aftab, but the handwriting was not his. It was a woman's dot at the bottom. It said, "To Shabazz, if you ever forget who you are." It was signed, "Sarah, your mother." Shabazz froze. His mother had died many years ago. This recipe was hers. He remembered now she had written it before she passed, and she had given it to Aftab to keep safe. He covered his face with both hands and cried. The girl stood quietly beside him. After a long pause, Shabazz said, "Thank you for trusting me enough to give this." She didn't smile, but she nodded. "I want to make it right," he said. "I want to find him. Will you help me?" She looked at him with serious eyes. "Only if you don't forget again." "I won't," Shabazz promised. Outside, the sky was still gray, but something inside Shabazz had changed. He no longer walked like a proud man. He walked like a man carrying something heavy, regret, but also a little hope, because he now had a recipe, not just for food, but for redemption. Shabazz walked out of the shelter with the old recipe in his hand. Rain still fell lightly, but it no longer bothered him. His mind was full of memories, some painful, some warm. The streets looked different now. They were not just roads or sidewalks, they were reminders. Reminders of how far he had come, and how far he had fallen. He held the paper tightly, like it was the last piece of his old self. He looked at the writing again, his mother's handwriting. Her words were gentle, just like her. He remembered her voice, her laughter in the kitchen, how she used to cook that exact dish when they had nothing else to eat. It was her way of saying, "We still have love." He stopped at a small tea stall and asked the owner, "Do you know where the trains leave for the south villages?" The man nodded. "Yes, sir. The next one leaves in 2 hours. You'll have to hurry." Shabazz thanked him and left. He didn't go back to his restaurant. He didn't change his clothes. He didn't tell anyone. He just bought a train ticket and waited. As he sat on the wooden bench, he looked at the people around him. Workers, farmers, tired children. For the first time in years, he felt like one of them. No one knew he owned a big restaurant. No one cared. And strangely, that made him feel free. The train arrived with a loud horn. Shabazz got on and sat near the window. The train moved slowly, at first, then faster. The city disappeared, replaced by fields, rivers, and trees. He didn't know exactly where Aftab had gone, but he remembered one thing. Aftab once said, "If I ever leave the city, I will go back to where kindness still lives in, the village where I was born." Shabazz didn't know the name, but he hoped someone would. After 6 hours, the train reached a small town. Shabazz stepped off, stretched his legs, and walked to a fruit seller. "Excuse me," he said, showing Aftab's photo. "Have you seen this man?" The fruit seller looked closely. Yes, I think so. He came here last week. He bought some bananas for a little girl." They walked south. Shabazz followed the direction, walking for miles. His feet hurt, but he didn't stop. Finally, he reached a village with mud houses and narrow paths. Children played with sticks and tires. Old women sat outside, making tea. A man chopping wood looked up as Shabazz approached. brother, Shabazz said, out of breath. I'm looking for this man. The man looked at the photo and nodded. Yes, he lives near the well with a young girl. They stay in the last house. Shabazz's heart jumped. Thank you. He walked fast down the path. He saw the well, he saw the house, and then, he saw her. The little girl stood outside, drawing lines in the mud with a stick. She looked up and saw him. Her face showed surprise, but not fear. Shabazz stepped closer. May I speak to him? She pointed to the doorway silently. Shabazz walked in slowly. Inside, F-Dab sat on a wooden chair, a thin blanket over his knees. He looked weaker than before, but his eyes were still sharp. He looked up and saw Shabazz. There was silence. Then F spoke. So, the chef returns. Shabazz fell to his knees. Baba, forgive me. I didn't know. I had no idea it was you. I was blind. Aftab didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, when I saw your face in that restaurant, I hoped to see pride in your success. But I saw something else. I saw someone who had forgotten where he came from. Shabazz's voice broke. I forgot everything. I forgot your kindness, your lessons, even my mother's words. He pulled out the recipe and held it out. You kept this for me? Aftab took the paper, smiled faintly, and nodded. Your mother gave it to me, she said. Give it to him when he no longer sees people as people. Tears ran down Shabazz's face. You have every right to hate me, but I don't, Aftab said softly. I was disappointed, yes, but hate, no. I only hoped that one day, you'd remember, and here you are. They sat in silence for a while. Then Shabazz said, I want to change everything. I want to turn the restaurant into something real, something honest. Will you help me? Aftab looked at the little girl standing in the doorway. I've helped enough. Now it's your turn. Shabazz nodded. Then I'll start by inviting you back. Please, let me serve you this time. Aftab shook his head. I've had enough food, but the people outside haven't. Shabazz understood what he meant. He stood up and bowed slightly. Then I'll feed them. As he left the house, the little girl followed him. You're different now. He smiled at her. I hope so. She held out her hand. Take this. It was a small drawing, 3 people standing in front of a big building with a heart on the roof. Is that my restaurant? He asked. She nodded. But it's not for rich people anymore. He laughed gently. No, it's not. He looked at the drawing, then at the road ahead. There was work to do, but this time, he would not forget. Not the faces, not the hunger, and never again. The kindness. Shabazz returned to the city the next day. The train ride felt different this time. He sat by the window, thinking quietly. The village air still clung to his clothes. He could still hear Aftab's voice and see the girl's drawing in his mind. He had gone looking for forgiveness. What he found was something deeper truth. Now it was time to act. When he reached his restaurant, the staff was surprised to see him. He looked different. His hair was messy. His shoes were covered in dust. But his eyes were calm. Faisal, the head chef, walked over to Sir. Are you okay? Shabazz nodded. Yes, I am. But this restaurant, it is not. Faisal looked confused. What do you mean? Shabazz walked to the center of the kitchen. Itia called all the staff together, chefs, waiters, cleaners. He stood in front of them and said, years ago, I was a poor man. I had nothing. One man gave me food and taught me to cook. His name is Aftab. Many of you don't know him, but you work in a place that he helped build. Yesterday, I kicked him out. Gasps filled the room. I didn't recognize him, Shabazz said. I had become blind. I cared more about money than people. But that ends now. He looked around the room. From this moment, this place will change. No one will ever be kicked out because they are poor. No one will ever be judged for how they look. If someone is hungry, we will feed them. If someone is lost, we will listen. The staff stared at him. Some looked unsure. Some looked hopeful. Shabazz smiled gently. This is no longer a restaurant only for the rich. It is a place for all, and if any of you wish to leave, I will not stop you. No one moved. Faisal stepped forward. I'm with you, sir. One by one, the others nodded. The next morning, Shabazz changed the sign at the entrance. The golden letters were taken down. In their place was a wooden board with hand-painted words. Welcome home. All are equal here. People passing by stopped and stared. Some whispered, some laughed. Some were curious. Inside, Shabazz sat with Faisal and designed a new menu. The prices were lower. A big notice was added at the bottom. Pay what you can. If you can't pay, you still eat. That afternoon, a young boy came to the door. He wore school clothes but had no bag. He looked nervous. Shabazz opened the door himself. Come in, he said kindly. The boy stepped inside slowly. I don't have money. I just am very hungry. Shabazz smiled. That's enough. He gave him a seat and served him a hot meal with his own hands. Word spread quickly. The next day, 5 people came. Then 10, then 20. Some were poor, some were lonely, some had money, but sat next to those who didn't. No one asked who was rich or who was not. Everyone was treated the same. The restaurant was alive again, but this time, in a new way. The air felt warm. The staff worked with smiles. The food tasted better, because it was made with care, not pressure. One evening, Shabazz sat near the window and watched a father and daughter eat together. The man wore old clothes. The girl had a small tear in her sleeve, but they smiled as they ate. Holding hands, Faisal came over. The bills are increasing, he said, but donations are coming in too. Shabazz nodded. If we serve with love, the world will return it. Faisal smiled. Also, there's someone waiting outside. Says he has something for you. Shabazz walked to the door. There, standing with a small envelope in his hand, was a young man. He looked nervous. Are you Shabazz? He asked. Yes, Shabazz said. The young man gave him the envelope. My father said to give you this. He couldn't come. Shabazz opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. Dear Shabazz, you remembered. That's all I ever wanted. This place was always yours, but only if your heart was open. Now I see that it is. I won't return. My journey is different now, but I leave you with one final gift. Inside the envelope was a key. On the back of the letter, it said, use this to open the old storeroom. The truth is in there. Shabazz rushed to the back of the restaurant. Behind the kitchen was a room no one had used in years. It had been locked since the day he bought the place. He had never opened it. He placed the key in the old lock. Click. Inside. The room was a box covered in cloth. He pulled the cloth away. Inside the box were papers, old ownership documents, photographs of a food cart, a handwritten note from Aftab. This restaurant was always meant to be yours. I only wanted to see if you would remember the path. You have. Shabazz stood there, silent. The man he had once kicked out was the same man who had given him everything. Twice. Tears filled his eyes. He whispered thank you. Later that night he lit a candle and placed it at the front of the restaurant. Beside it, he placed a small wooden sign that said, kindness always returns. The candle outside the restaurant burned softly through the night. People who passed by stopped to read the small sign beside it. Kindness always returns. Some smiled, some stayed quiet. Some just walked away. But the message stayed with them. Inside, Shabazz sat at a table, alone with the papers he had found in the old storeroom. The photograph showed the food cart where it all began. The handwritten note from Aftab still rested in his hand. His heart was full, but heavy. So much had changed in just a few days. Faisal entered quietly. Sir, the line outside is getting longer. Shabazz looked up. Then we'll need more soup. We're running low on rice, Faisal added. And vegetables. I'll go to the market, Shabazz said. You don't need to do that yourself, Faisal started. I want to, Shabazz said with a smile. It's time. I do more than just give orders. That afternoon, Shabazz walked to the local market carrying a large basket. Vendors were surprised to see him. Some remembered him from years ago, when he was just a helper at Aftab's old stall. Now he stood before them again, not as a proud restaurant owner, but as a man ready to serve. He bought vegetables, rice, flour, and lentils. As he paid, one of the vendors looked at him curiously. Are you Shabazz from that fancy restaurant? I was, Shabazz said. Now it's just a place where people eat with respect. The vendor smiled. I heard what you did. Not many people would change like that. Shabazz nodded humbly. I just remembered who I used to be. When he returned, he found something unexpected. A group of people stood outside the restaurant not to eat, but to help. Some had brought bags of rice. Some had vegetables. A bakery owner came with trays of fresh bread. We saw your sign, he said. We want to be part of it. Shabazz was touched. He welcomed them inside, gave them aprons, and showed them the kitchen. For the first time, strangers worked together. Poor, young, and old. They chopped onions, stirred pots, washed dishes, and served food. The smell of fresh food and warm laughter filled the air as the sun set. A new customer arrived. An old woman with a walking stick stepped in. Shabazz helped her to a seat. She looked at him and said, My son ate here yesterday. He had no money, but you gave him food. Today, I came to say thank you. Shabazz smiled. You're most welcome. What would you like to eat? Anything cooked with kindness, she replied. He served her lentil soup and fresh bread. She closed her eyes after the first bite and said, This tastes like home. That night, Shabazz sat again by the candle and wrote in a notebook. He began keeping a journal, not for business records, but for memories. He wrote down every story, every smile, every thank you. It reminded him that success wasn't about profit anymore. It was about people. But as the days passed, not everyone was happy about his changes. One afternoon, a man in a black suit entered the restaurant. He looked around with sharp eyes and walked straight to Shabazz. You're losing money, the man said. Your accountant told me. I'm your investor. Remember. Shabazz stood calmly. I remember, and I'm not losing money. I'm gaining something better. The man frowned. This place was meant to be high-end VIP clients. Expensive food. You've turned it into a soup kitchen. It's a kitchen for hearts, Shabazz replied, and I'm not turning back. The man laughed bitterly. You've gone soft. Fine. I'm pulling out my investment. Shabazz nodded. That's your choice. The man turned to leave, then stopped. You'll regret this. Shabazz looked at him and said, I used to regret not seeing the hungry faces, not hearing the quiet cries. Now I sleep peacefully. The man walked away, shaking his head. That night the donations slowed down. A few workers left. Some suppliers refused to deliver. Shabazz didn't panic. He called a meeting. I understand if anyone wants to leave, he told the staff. This road is not easy, but I will walk it, even if I have to walk alone. Faisal stood up. You're not alone. We're with you. The others clapped. But just when Shabazz thought the worst had passed, something else happened. A food inspector arrived. He walked through the kitchen with a serious face, checking everything. Shabazz followed him nervously. After an hour, the inspector said, You have no license to operate as a charity kitchen. You're serving people without charge. That's not allowed under your current permit. Shabazz's heart sank. So what do I do? You must apply for a different license, the inspector said. And until then, you cannot serve food for free. But people are hungry, Shabazz said softly. Rules are rules, the inspector replied. That evening, Shabazz locked the front doors for the first time in weeks. People stood outside. Confused, he stepped out and said, Just for a short time, we'll be back. He looked at the little girl from the shelter who had come with her friends. She asked, Is it over? Shabazz bent down and smiled. No, it's just a pause. We're not done yet. Inside, he sat again by the candle. He looked at Aftab's photo. I'm not giving up, he whispered, even if the world stands in my way. Outside, one by one, people began placing candles near the door. Dozens of small flames lit the street. The city was watching, and the story was not over yet. The next morning, Shabazz arrived at the restaurant early. The line of candles from the night before still burned softly in the wind. Some had melted, others had gone out. But the message was clear, people cared. He stood there for a moment, looking at the quiet street. The closed sign on the door made his chest feel heavy. He didn't like turning anyone away, especially not now. He went inside and sat at the same table where he always thought his mother's recipe lay on the table, next to Aftab's photo. He stared at it, remembering her words. If you ever forget who you are, this will remind you. Faisal walked in with 2 cups of tea. He placed one in front of Shabazz. The inspector said he'll come back in 2 days. Shabazz nodded. I've started the license process, but it takes time. Faisal sat down. Some people came by this morning. They asked if they could help in any way. Shabazz raised his eyes. Who were they? Just regular folks? A taxi driver? A school teacher? A woman who runs a small bakery? They brought rice and bread. Said, use this when you're open again. Shabazz smiled for the first time that day. Then maybe. The kitchen shouldn't stop. But we're not allowed to serve, Faisal reminded. Shabazz stood up slowly. We won't serve food in the restaurant. But no law says we can't cook. Faisal looked at him, confused. Cook for who? We'll cook for the streets, Shabazz said. We'll pack meals and give them away outside. Quietly, respectfully, no banners, no noise. Just food and care. That afternoon, the staff returned, one by one. They came with vegetables, rice, flour, and cooking oil. No one complained. No one asked for pay. They washed the pots, cut the onions, and rolled dough. The kitchen came alive again, like an old heart remembering how to beat. By evening, they had packed over 50 meals. Faisal loaded them into his car. Shabazz walked alongside him, carrying boxes. They drove to poor neighborhoods, small lanes where kids played barefoot, and mothers boiled water to stretch meals. One by one, they handed out the food. No one asked who they were. No one asked for money. They just took the food, smiled, and said thank you. Shabazz felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. That night, they returned to the restaurant, tired but happy. A small boy stood near the door, holding a candle in one hand and a flower in the other. He walked up to Shabazz and said, You fed my father last week. He was sick. You gave him soup. He's better now. This is for you. Shabazz bent down and took the flower. Thank you, beta. This means more than you know. The boy nodded and ran off. The next day, the inspector returned. He looked around, surprised to find the kitchen busy again. You're not serving here, are you? No, sir, Shabazz replied calmly. We're only preparing food. The law doesn't stop kindness from traveling. The inspector narrowed his eyes. Be careful. I always am, Shabazz said with a smile. That evening, a local reporter visited. She had heard about the candles and the meals. She asked Shabazz for an interview. At first, he refused. He didn't want fame, but Faisal said, maybe it's time people heard the full story. So Shabazz sat down and spoke. He told the reporter everything, about Aftab, about the mistake, about the change, about the promise he made to never forget kindness again. The story was shared on social media the next morning. It spread quickly. People across the city began to send support. Some came with groceries, some offered to volunteer. A few restaurants even copied the idea, opening pay-what-you-can windows. One evening, as Shabazz walked outside to check on the new candle line, a black car stopped nearby. A man in a suit stepped out. It was the same investor who had walked away days earlier. He looked around and said, This place, it's different now. Shabazz nodded. Yes, it has purpose. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a check. You were right. Money comes and goes, but respect, love, and community, that's real wealth. Shabazz looked at the check but didn't take it. Keep it, the man said. Not as an investment, as a gift. I just want to be part of something good. Shabazz slowly accepted it. After he left, Faisal said, So, things are turning. Shabazz didn't smile right away. Yes, but we must stay true. This isn't A project, it's a promise. That weekend, the new license arrived. They were now officially allowed to operate as a community kitchen and restaurant. Shabazz opened the doors again, but this time, there were no gold decorations. No expensive lighting, just clean tables, warm food, and one large message written across the wall. Days turned into weeks, and Shabazz's restaurant became a peaceful home for many. It no longer looked like a place built for business. It felt like a heart that kept beating with love. People came not just for food but for comfort. Lonely workers sat next to laughing children. Poor mothers received food wrapped with care. Strangers greeted each other with respect. In this little corner of the city, something beautiful was happening. One afternoon, as Shabazz stood near the counter, a girl handed him a letter. She was the same girl who once came from the shelter, the one who used to sell tissues on the street. She now helped in the restaurant, folding napkins and filling water glasses. Shabazz smiled and opened the letter slowly. It had no name, just words written in clear handwriting. You don't know me, but I was watching. I saw the day you changed. I saw the day you chased after the man you hurt. I saw your tears. That night, I was one of the people outside holding a candle. You gave me hope. I lost my father to hunger, but now I feed others in his name. Thank you for reminding me that kindness still lives. Shabazz folded the letter with care and placed it inside a glass box by the counter, where he had started collecting messages from people. There were now dozens thank you notes, drawings from children, letters from single mothers, old men, and teenagers who found peace in his food and warmth in his words. That same evening, Faisal came to him holding a file. Sir, someone wants to meet you. Who? Shabazz asked. A school principal, from the nearby government school. He says he has an offer. Shabazz walked outside, where a tall, kind-looking man stood. He wore glasses and held a book in his hand. Mr. Shabazz, he said warmly, I'm Principal Rauf. I've heard a lot about your work. My students, many of them eat here. Some of them come to school just because they know they'll get food after. Shabazz nodded gently. They're always welcome. The principal stepped closer. But I have a request. Would you consider teaching? Shabazz looked surprised. Teaching? I'm not a teacher. Oh, but you are, Principal Rauf said. With a smile, you taught this city how to feel again. You taught them how to give. I want you to talk to our students. Teach them kindness, service, and maybe even cooking. Shabazz looked down, touched. I'll come, he said quietly, gladly. The next week Shabazz stood before 30 students in a small classroom. Most of them were from poor families. Some wore torn shoes, others had shy eyes. But they all listened closely as he told his story, how he once begged for food, how app saved him, and how pride made him blind. But I opened my eyes again, he told them, because kindness never truly dies. It just waits for us to remember. After the class, one boy raised his hand. What happened to Aftab, uncle? Shabazz paused. I don't know, he said softly. He gave me everything, and then he left, but I feel like he's still watching. Another child asked, if I want to help people but have nothing, what do I do? Shabazz smiled. You smile at someone who's sad. You share your bread. You listen to someone who feels alone. That's how it starts. Back at the restaurant, more people began volunteering. A college student offered free tutoring to kids. An old lady baked bread and brought it every Friday. A man who once begged for coins outside now cleaned tables. With pride. One night, as Shabazz sat with his journal, the little girl from the shelter came running. There's someone outside, she said. He's asking for you. Shabazz stood quickly and walked to the door. An old man in a brown coat stood under the street lamp. Shabazz's heart skipped a beat. Aftab, the man smiled. No, Beta, I'm his brother. Shabazz stepped forward. Is he okay? The man nodded slowly. He's fine. Living quietly in the mountains, but he heard what you did. He asked me to come see for myself. Shabazz welcomed him inside, served him tea, and showed him the letters. The kitchen, the people. The man looked around, eyes full of emotion. You didn't just build a restaurant, he said. You built a movement. He took out a small wooden box and placed it in Shabazz's hands. What is this? Shabazz asked. Aftab told me to give it to you, he said. When Shabazz finally understands, give him this. Shabazz opened the box carefully. Inside was a single spoon, old, silver, and slightly bent. This was the spoon he used when he served his first meal to you, the man said. Shabazz held it tightly that night. He placed the spoon in the glass box beside the letters. Under it, he added a new sign. This spoon fed the hungry heart that now feeds the world. The restaurant continued to grow, not in size but in soul. Every part of it now had meaning. The tables had names like hope, peace, and forgiveness. The wall was filled with drawings from children and thank you notes from strangers. But one message stood at the center of it all, in big bold letters. Kindness is not an act. It is a way of life. And everyone who walked through those doors felt it. They didn't just eat food, they tasted humanity. The days grew warmer, and the city slowly changed around Shabazz's little restaurant. The line of candles outside had become a permanent sight. People brought fresh ones every evening. Some placed flowers, others brought handwritten notes. It had become more than a place to eat, it was now a symbol, a place where no one was turned away, a place where dignity and love were served with every meal. One morning, Shabazz stood outside sweeping the front steps. He no longer wore expensive shoes or gold watches. His clothes were simple. His smile was real. As he swept, a young girl holding her father's hand walked past. She pointed at Shabazz and said, "Papa, that's the kindness man." Shabazz looked up and chuckled. The father smiled too. "Thank you for feeding us when we had nothing," he said softly. "Now I have work again." "I came to say thank you." Shabazz placed a hand on his chest. "You're always welcome, brother. May your table always stay full." Inside, the restaurant buzzed with quiet joy. Volunteers chopped vegetables. A college student read a storybook to kids in the corner. A young boy filled water glasses, proudly wearing a small apron with his name on it, Rizwan, little helper. He had once come in with empty hands. Now he came in with purpose. In the kitchen, Faisal stirred a pot of lentil soup. He looked at Shabazz and said, "Do you remember the day you made us promise never to forget kindness?" Shabazz nodded, but Faisal continued, "You made us believe again, not just in food, but in people." Shabazz stepped beside him and helped stir. It was never just about food. It was always about hearts. Later that afternoon, a man entered with a camera crew. He wore a blazer and held a microphone. He introduced himself as a journalist from a popular national news channel. "We've been hearing stories about this place," he said. "Is it true that people eat here even if they have no money?" Shabazz smiled. "That's true. And that you were once on the streets yourself?" "Yes," Shabazz answered. "I was hungry. A kind man fed me. He gave me a second chance. I forgot that for many years. But now, I remember every day." The journalist looked round, amazed. "We'd love to feature your story. It might inspire others." Shabazz hesitated for a moment but then nodded. "Only if you tell the truth, that I was lost before I was found." That evening, the segment aired on TV. People across the country saw it. Some cried, some sent messages, others came. To visit the restaurant became known as the House of Kindness. One day, a letter arrived from the mayor's office. Shabazz was invited to a special event, a ceremony honoring citizens who had brought positive change. When the day arrived, Shabazz stood on the stage beside doctors, teachers, and social workers. When his name was called, the crowd stood and clapped. He stepped forward, received a medal, and said just one sentence, "This is not for MIT, belongs to every hungry child and every kind stranger." The applause grew louder. Back at the restaurant, the little girl from the shelter was now learning how to write. She sat at a small table near the counter, carefully writing her first story. She looked up and asked, "Can I write about you, Uncle Shabazz?" He smiled. "No, Beta, write about the spoon." She giggled. "The one in the glass box." "Yes," he said, because it fed more than just one person. It started a ripple. Weeks passed. One day, as Shabazz swept outside again, a quiet figure appeared on the other side of the road. He was older now, thinner, but the walk, the eye, Shabazz knew them. His heart stopped. "Aftab," he whispered. The man slowly walked across and stopped in front of him. "I heard your voice on TV," Aftab said. "You said you were lost and now you're found." Shabazz's eyes filled with tears. He dropped the broom and stepped forward. "You came back," Aftab smiled. "I came to see if the boy I once fed could now feed the world." Shabazz held his hand. "I can't ever thank you enough." "You don't have to," Aftab replied. "Just keep feeding their hearts." He walked inside. The staff, the children, the guests, everyone turned as he entered. They didn't know who he was, but they felt something in the room shift. Shabazz brought him a chair. "Please sit. Today, I'll serve you." Aftab nodded slowly. "Only if you eat with me." And so they sat together at the center table. 2 generations. One meal, no pride, no walls, just warmth. After the meal, Aftab stood and looked around. "I'll leave again," he said softly. "But this time, I'm not worried. You remember now." Shabazz placed a hand on his shoulder. "I won't forget again." That night, Shabazz added one last item to the wall beside the spoon. It was a photo, a young man with messy hair and hungry eyes, standing beside a food cart, holding a plate of rice. Below it, a caption, "He was fed once. Now he feeds the world."